Hey everybody, how are you all doing today? Oh, I'm doing fantastic. Although my voice is still not 100% back, so forgive me if it sounds a little hoarse. But, well. How the tables have turned around the tables and the chairs and the tables. Geography is everything, well and truly. Last chapter, chapter 1113 of One Piece, Vegapunk got his message out. All right, after he had a light cup of coffee and burned his tongue slightly and then tried to cool it down, but then couldn't cool it down, he decided to announce to the world, by the way, spoiler alert, the world's going to sink into the ocean, which I have to just say, just the setup for that is hilarious. Like, imagine you wake up in the middle of the night and your little snail is ringing that the smartest man in the entire world has a very important message to declare, and you're like, okay, I guess. I mean, what could it possibly be? Is this the announcement of the new iPhone or something? No, the world's gonna sink into the ocean. Like the entire world? Yes. I'm like, that's a problem. It's like, yes, it is. We didn't listen. I can't yell, but, it's just like, we didn't listen. All right. As soon as that was announced at the end of the chapter, the world's going to sink into the ocean. I immediately thought of three things. All right. And I mentioned them in the review. I immediately thought, Marijois being on top of the red line, that makes sense now. It's like the highest point on the planet without getting into the Sky Island territory, like the White Sea and the White Sea, and I guess the moon. Eneru is set. All right, Eneru doesn't even need to come back down. All right, maybe honestly that ties back into a whole thing now. Maybe like the legend of the fairy Verth or like the endless Verth makes more sense now, because it's like, yeah, that would be objectively the safest spot, because the water can get as high as it wants. It's not hitting the moon. You know what I mean? Like, so I guess that prophecy might have actually held true for Eneru, I guess. But the highest point without getting into the White Sea or the White Sea would be the top of the red line, and that's where Marijois is. So there you go. That solves that conundrum there. Also gives a little bit more context onto what happened with the Lunarians. Like, we understood the government probably killed all the Lunarians to take over, the top of Marijois where they originally lived. But now you get kind of why. And you know what? It's fascinating to me, because way back when I first started the whole geography is everything, like the video where I first say that is because Marijois was situated on top of this giant mountain. It's like a fortress. You can't invade it. All right. Now, I didn't immediately assume like, oh, the world's going to flood, that's why they're up there. But like, it's a very strategic point no matter how you dice it. So that makes sense there, where the Tenryubito are safe. The other thing I also thought of was at Water 7, you have Iceberg, who was talking to Frankie at the end of the Enies Lobby arc. He was discussing, like, oh yeah, this Aqua Laguna this past year was pretty bad. And it was mentioned that Water 7, it's very much based off of Venice, and Venice is sinking a little bit in our world. Kind of the same deal in One Piece. So it was a thing that Oda threw out there, like, oh yeah, it's based off of Venice. That's why it's sinking. No, there's something else going on here, all right? It's just that Water 7's a little bit more susceptible to it, okay, with the way that island is laid out. It was even mentioned that the current Water 7 is built on top of the old Water 7. In fact, the buildings that are constructed in Water 7 right now are designed with the idea that one day eventually they will get, underwater, and then you could build more buildings on top of them, like over like tiered structures over and over and over again, right? So Iceberg was talking to Frankie, and they were talking about Tom and everything, and how he was able to make the impossible possible with a dawn. And Iceberg's like, I'm going to redesign Water 7, and I'm going to turn it into a ship. And then Frankie's like, what? You can't turn the whole island into a ship. And he's like, Tom could have done it. And it's like, you know what? Damn straight. And so Iceberg's gonna be fine, the Skypeans are gonna be fine, the Tenryubito are gonna be fine. I mean, after Dragon's Revolution, they might not be fine, but from this one particular instance, if the ocean level were to rise, they're gonna be fine. Oh, by the way, should talk about that. The verbiage that Vegapunk used here, and I even checked the official just to be sure, the world will sink into the ocean. He uses the term sink. Okay? Now, why is that important? Well, I would argue if the ocean level increased, like it would be a flood, right? So saying the world would sink, it's not inaccurate, but in that statement, it would be more like the ocean is going to flood or the ocean level is going to rise or something like that. There will be a great flood and the ocean level will increase in volume and size and then drown everything on the planet, right? He uses the term sink as if all the islands, everything is going to fall into the ocean. Now, you could just say potato, potato, tomato, tomato. Who cares? Same difference. But there is some difference there because we also have Enies Lobby, which has a giant hole. And I said in the reviews, like, wait a minute. What if the ocean in the One Piece world was way higher than it is now? Like maybe comparable to the top of the red line. And then, you know, you have the, like basically it's like pulling the plug or the drain in a bathtub and the ocean is slowly swirling around. Now, the hole at Enies Lobby is pretty big, but relative to the size of the entire planet, not really. It's tiny compared to that. So it just took that long for, you know, the water to kind of like go down into the drain. But then where would the water go? Would it just keep going down until it hits the core and then evaporate? Like, what would go on with that, right? So that's a question. And then there's the whole situation with Lelucia, which, you know what? I finally found out what Lelucia was. People were talking about Lelucia. I had no idea what it was. Lelucia is a brand new tourist attraction that opened up in the Grand Line. Come see the giant Lelucia crater. That's what it is, all right? People were saying it's an island or something. It's clearly a crater, okay? But when that crater showed up mysteriously someday, I'm not really sure, the ocean level rose by 1 meter because, like, you can imagine the water is being, like, pushed away. Or could you see that everything sunk by 1 meter? I don't really know, okay? Point is, everything's going to be underwater except for a few exceptions. Now, Oda is a true master of foreshadowing because, and the fans are great at this, because within, like, minutes of the chapter coming out, I was seeing people in the comments talking about like, oh, this was foreshadowed in chapter 161. This was foreshadowed in chapter 4, whatever. This was this chapter 727, this was mentioned. You just go back through the whole One Piece. Like, people say, I know a lot about this series. There were things that people brought up that I completely forgot about. Some stuff I didn't even remember, okay? There was a line, I think it was in chapter 160 or 161, something like that, where Vivi, when the crew were arriving in Eremalu in Alabasta, right? It's on the coast of the Shandora River, and that is where, or the Sandora River, I think, and that's where the Kung Fu Dugongs show up and, like, beat the crap out of Usopp, and then Luffy takes them as his disciples and everything like that. And Sanji brings up, like, dugongs in a river, like freshwater dugongs. That's kind of weird. You don't see those very often. And Vivi clarifies and says, well, yeah, actually, the Sandora River typically was, you know, very strong, and it's lost its pull, though, in the last few, you know, years or decades or centuries or whatever. And, you know, a lot of the seawater is now encroaching on the Sandora River. So that's why the dugongs were there, okay? So, and that's not the reason Eremalu was, you know, a desert, you know, just like a wasteland. That was because of the dance powder and Crocodile's scheme and everything like that. But she does mention it, and it's weird that she would mention it, right? Because it's like, oh yeah, we're here to stop Crocodile. Oh, Eremalu is completely destroyed. It's a wasteland. What happened here? Oh, well, you know, some of the seawater has encroached on the freshwater. Oh, that's the reason. Oh no, that has nothing to do with anything. Crocodile is the real reason. It's like, why would you bring that up? Here we go, over 1,000 chapters later, he brought it up for a reason. There you go, okay? So that was something that was indicated. My favorites, though, without question, are the references to Roger's crew, all right? So, remember when Rayleigh was explaining what they saw at Laugh Tale in Shocky's bar? He didn't go into great detail, but with Robin specifically, he had a line that was, As you are now, there's nothing you could do about it. There was this vibe of the inevitable when Rayleigh was speaking to Robin. Like, the things that we found out at Laugh Tale, the things that we learned about the Void Century, they're going to happen no matter what. You can't really do much about it. So I think part of it is Rayleigh and Roger and everybody on the crew, at Odin as well, learned, I guess, I guess not Buggy and Shanks, although they might have told them later, the world is going to sink into the ocean. Rayleigh knew about this, all right? And it makes sense that he would preface that with Robin, and he would be like, look, young lady, I can tell you what we learned, but as you are now, you're going to be probably overwhelmed by it, and you're going to be like, what? And it's like, there's nothing you could do about it. And so Rayleigh didn't just come out and said it. He said, are you sure you want me to tell you this? I can. And then Robin's like, you know what? No, I don't want to know. I'm going to go on my own journey with my own crew, and I'll find out what it is at my own, and Rayleigh's like, I think that's for the best. Okay. Because he says, oh, me and Roger and the crew, we were there. Maybe we were a bit too hasty, with our, finding out about what happened there. So I don't think learning about the ocean, covering up the whole world, like every island sinking, is what made Roger laugh. Because that seems like a weird thing to laugh about, Like, you get there, you learn about the Void Century, and it's like, the world's going to sink into the ocean. Everybody's going to die. And Roger's like, oh my God, mateys, that was a great joke if there ever was one. Best knock-knock joke in the world, I say. Yarg. Rayleigh, Crocus, everybody's on their ground. Like, maybe Oda could twist it like they were laughing out of, like, you ever, I don't know, did you ever get some really bad information in life or some bad news and your brain doesn't even know how to process it, so you're just like, I don't know. I mean, like, I guess that could happen. Like, the world's going to sink and everyone's going to die. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I just don't know how to respond to that. Like, what am I supposed to, Okay, I don't think it was that, though, because Roger goes on to say, oh, Joy Boy, I wish I was alive in your era. So that implies that, like, there was something else going on there. But Rayleigh and Crocus and everybody could have still known about the world sinking. Case in point, I always found it a little bit weird that Rayleigh works as a ship coder. I mean, it's fine. It's just, yeah, here's Silver's Rayleigh. He used to be the first mate on Goldie Roger's crew. Okay. He coats ships for a living now. Oh, okay. So was he like the shipwright? Nah, he wasn't the shipwright. I'm like, oh, okay. So did he ever really have a fascination of ship coding? It's like, not really. Never anything that's explained in the backstories or the flashbacks. Maybe he was into that stuff. Maybe that was his hobby, but we just never... Most of the time, he's just gambling or drinking or hanging out with Shocky. Hanging out with Shocky. You get my meaning? That's right. Him and Shocky every night. Playing, Xbox or whatever in their bar. That's what they're doing. They play board games together. They're a lovely couple. But, like, also, by the way, he's a ship coding mechanic. He knows a lot about this. And that was funny enough. But then you get to Crocus. Crocus lives in a whale. Crocus is gonna be fine. All right? It's like, if you find out the world's gonna sink into the ocean, and it's like Roger's crew learn about that, and it's like, all right, well, there's nothing we can do to prevent that, right? I mean, maybe some new information will come down the pipeline later. Maybe we could figure out some way to stop this, but for right now, we should probably just take care of ourselves and our loved ones and prepare for the inevitable. You know what I mean? Like, that's probably what you or I or anybody would do if you found out tomorrow the world was gonna sink. It was like, all right, I don't know, like, try to live on top of a mountain or something. Like, what do you want to do? Like, how are you going to stop that, right? So in the case with Rayleigh, he's like, yeah, I'm not going to stop it. I'm going to have to be reactive to it, and I'm just going to have to figure out some way to survive. I'll be a ship coating mechanic. I'll coat some vessels and maybe go down and figure something out that way. Crocus already had a whale. Now the idea of Crocus redesigning Laboon with all the different ducts and the trapdoors and everything like that, there's a practical reason for that because he's so big. In order to administer medical treatment, he has to go inside of Laboon. But I think it might have just been like a two birds, one stone kind of deal where Crocus comes back from his journey after being with Roger and he tells Laboon about the Rumbar pirates, like they're gone, they're dead. And he also at the same time is like, oh yeah, the world's also gonna sink. So, mind if I live in you, old friend? And Laboon's like, Laboon, I guess so. I imagine Laboon as a Pokemon for some reason, and Laboon is just Laboon. Okay, Wano, right? Okay, now this is where things get kind of interesting, okay? After Odin learned about what happened during the Void Century, he learned everything about the true history in the world and everything. He goes back to Wano. And, of course, he has the conflict with Orochi, and he starts dancing and everything like that. But before all that, the idea was he's returning to Wano to bring down the walls. He's like, we will bring down the walls of Wano and to hearken in Joy Boy, or we have to prepare for Joy Boy's arrival or something, right? If Odin knew the world was going to sink, you'd think, you'd want to keep the walls up. Now, that's a decision Momonosuke eventually did make. Like, we're not going to bring down the walls just yet. But you'd think that Odin, if he did know, would be like, well, if we're going to sink, or rather, if the water is going to flood, like if the sea level is going to increase, so the islands don't go down, the sea level goes up, you would leave up the walls. But what if there's something else going on here which would lend to him lowering the walls? Not really sure about any of that. Also, Wano, as we know it right now, is built on the side, like on the peak or near the peak of Mount Fuji. So even if like the walls go down and that rainwater empties out, Wano's still going to be on top of the mountain, because all the land had already been shifted and changed up there, right? It would be still up there. I don't think it would because if like the walls go down and all the water drains out, then like would Wano just collapse in a massive like mountain slide? I don't think that's going to happen, right? Then there's the whole thing with Fishman Island, with Luffy destroying it. I think going with the idea that the red line, maybe not all of the red line at once, but if just huge chunks of the red line, if the red line where Marijois is, if that whole chunk just collapses, and if Reverse Mountain also collapses, then that's going to be enough water that's going to be displaced that it will flood the world. I could definitely see that. The way that, and then Vegapunk has to expand upon this, obviously. We just got, like, the first sentence of the message. But Vegapunk could go on to say that, like, the red line's going to collapse no matter what. Like, it's an inevitability. It's going to happen. So, when that occurs, I guess Fishman Island will be destroyed, Reverse Mountain will be destroyed, and then the world will be flooded, okay? But he said sink, which is interesting. Now, though, I'm also kind of curious, going back through all of One Piece, where Oda placed all this foreshadowing crap. I would not be surprised that in every major story arc, there's a little bit of foreshadowing. I wouldn't be surprised if Oda did it on that level. Maybe not overtly, but, like not even to the level of like when Vivi personally explained like, oh yeah, sea levels are getting stronger around Alabasta, where she directly said that. But like, I'm thinking about Thriller Bark. Okay, there's those weird eldritch, giant Cthulhu things walking around. Do they have something to do with this? The fact that Thriller Bark was, they turned it into a ship and made it from the West Blue all the way around the world into the first half of the Grand Line, which logistically speaking should not be possible. Does that have something to do with this? I don't know. I'm just thinking about like obviously Enies Lobby in the hole, Lelucia in the hole. Does that have something to do with this all overall? You could look at like every arc now and like with a fine-tooth comb and just be like, what is happening with all these different locations? Is this a hint? Is this a hint? Is this a hint? The Baratier will be fine in the east. That's a boat. That's floating along. That's fine. Fishmen and merfolk, I mean, their homeland's probably going to get destroyed. But, they'll still, there's other settlements below. There's the Goldfish Empire. There's the Catfish Kingdom. These are places that exist. There's also ruins down there that we saw during Jinbei's cover story, Jinbei's solo journey, that we saw a wreck of a bunch of like ruins and temples and places down there. So, the world's sea level has probably been steadily increasing, throughout, but then the whole thing with like draining water, that's a question I have. Maybe it's magic. I don't know how it goes. Like, where's the water emptying out? I don't know, right? Like, so there's still a lot that needs to be explained here. But holy crap, Oda. You know how to foreshadow like nobody's business. All right, you're playing the long game here for decades, and I love it. So, yeah, those are just an immediate list of some things that I thought of, and then I also saw a bunch of people talking about, like, I didn't even think about the Rayleigh and Crocus thing, and I didn't know about the Shandora River thing. I didn't know that was, like, I don't even remember that panel. I had to go back and look at that specifically, because I didn't even remember that being mentioned, okay, about the Kung Fu dugongs and stuff like that. Little bit more added to the pile, I guess. I don't know, but I'm gonna stop this right here just to give my voice a little bit of a break. Sorry, I wish I could go on a little bit longer than this, but I really shouldn't push it. So thanks for watching, everybody. Geography is everything. We're entering a break week, so I have some time to recuperate here, and then make some other videos and streams talking about like everything in general and getting your opinions on it. Thanks for watching and being a fan and all that stuff. End screen, which is my foreshadowing, because what's in the background of the end screen? Yeah, that's my foreshadowing.